Yay! I see
Yay,
the
we're
live.
live.
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. Finally, glad we got this one
Yes.
working.
So, yeah. So welcome to all of you. This is your host, Jasmina, and today Nelson, and also Liz Fernandez with us. So, Eric, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Jess?
I'm fine. I'm doing great as well. So, how are you, Liz?
I'm good.
Yeah, Jess, we noticed a little bit of a delay
So,
on your time.
so, Eric, so you have something about yourself and also the books that you have published so far from the SomnAgent series.
Sure. So I guess starting with me, for people who weren't able to join us the last time, my name, of course, is Erik Nelson, and I wrote a couple books for a specific trilogy called the SomnAgent series. And I guess before I get into the books, I really started writing when I was 13. Um, I used to not be able to sleep very well, and someone told me just to write down my ideas. I used to lay in bed just like thinking of I couldn't stop thinking about stuff. So someone said to write it down, and that was kind of the very beginning of my writing. And I used to write short stories and make up characters and things. I think maybe how most people get started in writing, where they just have ideas and they just start writing them down. And then I started traveling after college. And I had written some stuff before then, but nothing really serious. But when I was traveling, I decided while I was traveling, I would take it a little bit more seriously. Funny enough, when I was traveling, I found that I had a little bit more time on my hands. You can only go and be a tourist so much. And when I was out and about, I just decided to start writing and really consistently and kind of a little bit more disciplined about it. And that was back in 2011. And then published my first book in 2012, and have been doing it ever since. I just completed my second novel. It's called the first book is called The Snake and the Fox, and the second book that I just completed is called The Shadows and the Innocence, and is a direct sequel to the first book there. Yeah. You still there, Jess?
That your series, the SomnAgent series, is a trilogy, right?
Yes, yeah, it is a trilogy. There will be a third book.
Yes, can you hear me, Eric?
Oh, yes. I think there's a little delay between Liz and I and yourself. I think Liz and I were on the same
Yes,
wavelength,
so,
but a little delay on your side.
all right, okay. That's like, yeah. Is it clear enough?
Oh, we can hear you clearly. I just think there's maybe like a 3 or 4 second delay between our conversation.
Oh, can you tell us a bit more about the continuation of the story from book?
Yeah, book one. For those who have read book one, it leaves. Are you still there? Okay. Yeah, book one leaves at the Frozen Stone. Of course, if we were to do kind of a recap, in book one, you have the two main characters, Slider and Pippa, and they're on their journey to go kill the king. And for those who read the book, it doesn't go quite as planned, and some intrigue ensues, and they end up going to this other place called the Frozen Stone, which is kind of like a prison it's like an icy prison island where the gangs live. And there's a reason why they were sent there, although it's not immediately apparent in the first book. The guy who set them up, he's a wizard who set them up to be captured. He sends them there telling them that they're going to be killed by this thieves guild called the Rats Thieves Guild. And they just assume that they're going there to die. And they might. While they're there, it's very dangerous, and they're pretty much on everyone's hit list. While at the same time they're scrambling to survive, they end up joining the guilds. There's the Wolf Guild and the Rat Guild. Slider ends up joining the Rat Guild, and Pippa ends up joining the Wolf Guild. And they're just trying to survive on this really cutthroat, very dangerous place. And while they're there, they learn a little bit more kind of about the story as a whole. They learn a little bit more about this thing called the Wonder Shard, which we later learn is a piece of something even bigger. And this thing apparently has incredible power that they see and they find out, but it's hard to control. And at the end of the book, Pippa ends up escaping with some of his allies that he develops on the island, while Slider and Lilium, who's another character who we meet along the way, they're left on the island pretty much, we assume, to die. There's no other way off the island. There's no more food or water coming. Pretty much everyone who's left on the island, we're just assuming, is going to be dead, unless they can figure out a way to escape. And then at the very end, of course, we see Pit and Nim. They miraculously show up on a boat. And Nim, in her strange cheerfulness, is like, "Hey, so we're here. How's it going?" And, of course, Slider and Lilium are scratching their heads going, "What's going on?" And that's kind of where it ends. And, of course, Pit, who is another character we met kind of in the first half, he disappears in the second half. We don't actually know what happens to him. Nim meets up with him, and they just vanish out of thin air while they're trying to kill the king back at the castle. And that's kind of where the second book takes place. The second book actually begins right after Pit and Nim disappear. And it sort of goes through what they were going through in their adventures while Slider and Pippa are on the Frozen Stone. And then the story continues to the point where Pit and Nim meet Slider and Lilium on the Frozen Stone, and then it continues even beyond there to progress more of the storyline. So we get to see where Pit went, what happened to him, and then we get to find out more of the adventures of them as a whole, because Slider, Lilium, Pit, and Nim, they're all joined together again, and they stick together for pretty much the rest of the story. And more intrigue and some hilarity ensues. Nim was very fun to write. She was a very fun character.
So I think this second book of yours actually features Lilium and Jekyll. It's more about Lilium, right?
Yeah. So much like the first book, where the first book was really divided between Slider and Pippa. Part one of the first book is really Slider focused, and it's sort of told from how he would see the story and how he would see things in general. And then Pippa's part, which is the second half of the book, is really told from his perspective, and a lot of the details are things that he would notice. You get mostly from what's going on in his story. Well, taking that, we're progressing even further, and in the second book, the first half is dedicated to Pit, much in the same way. We get to see things from his perspective, which is very different from Slider and Pippa and anyone else, and we get to see his part of the story. And I think a lot of the good, much like I think in the first book, the second half was people's preferred and favorite. Pippa was very interesting character. Everyone really enjoyed his section. Not that they didn't enjoy Slider's section, but I think Pippa's section really shined. Lilium gets her section in the second half of the second book as well. And so far, feedback has been that she very much shines, and a lot of people really learn about her and get to appreciate her. Also, she's the first and only really truly main female character, and she's so dynamic and so powerful of a person. And she has this monster inside of her that she has to deal with called the Jackal, which is like a kind of a demon spirit that she lives with and negotiates with. She really kind of negotiates her own existence, which is fun to watch and very interesting dynamic. And I think that really shines in the second book. People really have really like that.
Right. So we have Liz over here. That's your second book, right?
There's a little bit of a delay. Did you ask me that I've read the second book, or I'm sorry, I didn't catch the question?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, you have read Erik's book, the first book, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I've definitely read the first book, and I've read the first round of editing for the second one. I haven't finished the second post-editing round. I mean, post-editing version of the book. But I have read both books. Yes.
So tell us a bit more about. How was the second? Was expectation met at the end for the second book?
I'm sorry, can you, I don't know who that was addressed to. Was it?
Jazz, we're noticing kind of a breakup when you ask us questions. Would it be okay if you typed in the questions?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Easier. We can hear you, but there's a big delay, and sometimes it goes in and out, and it's a little difficult to hear you or understand you. Is it possible maybe you can type the questions? Is that okay?
Right. All right. Yeah, I will try that out now.
Yeah, I think that's going to work a little easier.
I think so too. I hope so.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Should be working over there.
Yeah,
yeah.
I really enjoyed both books, and I think what I really enjoyed in the second book, I think there's certain characters that you're enamored in the first book that are a little bit absent in the second book, right? And you're wondering like kind of where they are, but without giving too much away, you see them nearing the end there, and you get really happy. But what I really liked about the second book too is that Erik began to explore, other characters and like their many facets, and introducing some as well. As I typed, as you can see, I'm a big fan of Lilium because I'm currently doing a lot of reading in my own field about strong female characters, and there's kind of a lack of strong female characters out there, unfortunately, with the on-rise of, like, I'm not going to name names, but a certain sparkling vampire and and his love gun. I don't know if you know who it is, wink wink, but so I really do like Lilium. I like that that really interesting, sorry, Erik kind of touched upon it before, but that dimension to her character. She's the type of character that doesn't really. She has much agency coming from herself. She doesn't really need, you know, she's an asset to the team, right? She doesn't make them lag behind or I don't know, hinder them in any way. And I think that's really refreshing. And I really like that about the second book, because the first book, while I really enjoyed it, there weren't that many, I feel like, or a concentration of female characters. Also, I think this book, and if I'm not mistaken, I just read it this way, I think it's a bit more introspective as well. Like, you get more of a psychological insight into the characters versus the first book, which is really interesting and a really interesting development. So I think those are the two major things that I liked between the two books and the differences.
Oh, Erik. So since this is at the yeah, so tell us a bit more about book.
Janice, I have to apologize. I didn't quite catch that. Again, for the same technical issues we were having. Do you think you could type that one out? Thank you so much. Sorry about that.
Yes, I'm
And actually, I would like to follow up while you're typing that. We'll get to that one soon. I wanted to ask Liz a little bit. When you're talking about the psychological development of the characters, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on that. How did you feel it was a little different, and how were you able to really extract more from how they were thinking and more what's going on inside their head?
Sure. I think and I think we had a conversation on this like one day. Like I was stuck in traffic or something, about you in the second book you use something called free and direct discourse, which is something a lot of my favorite authors through time, like Jane Austen and so forth, have used in their own writing. And I think that's basically a method for a writer to manipulate in a way the narrator and make the narration of the story more reflective of the character that it's describing. And I think that, with a combination of like inward thought that we see a lot in oh my gosh, it's left me, Pitt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pitt, yeah, sorry. My brain's a little not working right now. But Pitt, I think you get a combination of both things. So you get that free and direct discourse, and then you get some really like insightful, philosophical actually thoughts from Pitt that I didn't feel like you got that much from Slider or Pippa. Like, you had moments of it, but it was definitely more prevalent in the second book. So that's what I meant about more like psychological insight.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the sort of a little bit more of the philosophy, in that when I first designed the structure of the 3 books as a whole, I actually really wanted to start, like, it was a very conscious decision to have Slider's section be the first section, and then Pippa's section be the second, and then Pitt, and then Lilium, and then the third book, how it's going to develop, because it's an expansive perspective. So Slider, he's very detail-oriented, very focused on the minute. He pays attention. He pretty much only focuses on what's in front of him in that moment, and he doesn't think on a bigger picture than his immediate surroundings so much. Pippa, on the other hand, he's much more adept at understanding the social situation and kind of his community, more or less, and which I really wanted to use, again, to sort of, each character kind of, their perspective expands the worlds just by how they perceive it and experience it. So again, in Slider's perspective in the first book, it's really much just them going through each step-by-step place where they're at, you know, what's going on. So it's really limited and very narrow-focused, but also very detail-oriented. And then, of course, Pippa, we understand the social interactions of the different gangs and the guilds and all of the characteristics of each person that he's dealing with. And we get a bigger picture. With Pitt, I'm expanding that even further. He's looking at cities and people, how they all fit within the world together. He's looking at, okay, this city has a characteristic, and other cities have characteristics, and the weather in general affects the mood of the world, and he has very much a, again, like his perspective is kind of understanding the world as a whole. And if you want to think of it almost like dimensions, like Slider would be a very singular dimension, very just, this is the spot, and that's it. Phippa, he can draw a line from one point to another point, and he can make those connections to draw lines between characters. Pitt, he's very three-dimensional. He understands the world as a whole as he sees it. And then Lilium, we add that fourth dimension where she, because she's more or less immortal, and she's lived over 100 years, I think about 132 is the age, and she not only has this three-dimensional image of the world, but she can also compare it over time, adding that fourth dimension. And so we get an even bigger perspective. We get history. We finally, Lilium's section is really where we actually get real history about, you know, stuff that happened before the immediate past. You know, I mean, we understand that maybe 10 years ago something bad happened, and a little bit before that there was a revolution where the cities, where these thieves guilds within the city sort of took over. So that's like a general, just kind of setting history. But with Lilium, we actually get to experience history. We get to experience her memories throughout history, and we get to understand how they've connected to everything else. And her past is actually very relevant to the current present. And I think that's really that's a really fun and exciting tool that I get to use to sort of expand the world. And I even remember one of the people who read the book told me from the first book that if they could have changed one thing, it would be that we would get a more expansive view of the world. And I didn't want to tell him at the time, but in the back of my head, I wanted to note that that was I chose to leave you in the dark, especially in the first book, about the world as a whole, and we get to see it a lot more. And with that comes these philosophical questions, especially with Pitt, who's a very introspective character. We get to see him thinking about, you know, right and wrong, good and evil, and how they're mixed together. And we get to ask those questions that we didn't really get to ask from the first book. We were shown them, and we get to see what it looks like to have good and evil blended into gray, but that was never really a discussion in the first book. It just was. In the second book, we really get that discussion a little bit more of right and wrong and good and evil and things like that. And Lilium, I think, does such a fun job at
Right.
at living
So,
that too.
Eric,
We get to take,
can you
come right off of Pitt and really, yes, and then Jas had her question there. And her question is, can you let us know about the development of Book 3 next? And Book 3 is, again, it's currently in development. It's going to follow a similar structure as the first two books, with a slight difference in that we will get to see a little bit more of a mixing of the characters' perspectives in the third book. However, the first half is mostly going to be dedicated to this other character. I pronounce his name Queckelm. He's also known as Raven. And it's going to be a little bit mostly from his perspective and how he sees things and why he's there. And he's kind of like the bad guy so far. And hopefully we get to see where he comes from and understand him a little bit more. And then we get to wrap it up in the second half with all of the characters together.
Right. So, so far, how is your book 2 doing so far?
It's actually doing quite well. Unfortunately, it's not released as of right now in this moment for hardcover or paperback. That's still in development. I'm still working on formatting it for paper. But the digital sales are actually doing pretty well, and I haven't had because by the time I think the first book's been out for a couple of years, I've had a lot more feedback about the first book. The second book's only been out for about, as of this moment, I think about 2 or 3 weeks. So of the people that have bought it, I haven't had as much feedback. However, the feedback I have received is very positive, and very in favor, very much leaning towards Lilium as the star. Lilium is very much the star of the second book. Pitt actually, people really like him and enjoy him, but I think it's refreshing, like Liz mentioned, the dynamic of a woman hero slash anti-hero. You know, she and all of the issues that she goes with, and I think a lot of men and women have responded very positively to that. And I do agree with Liz in that there isn't as many just women heroes that take on the same power and the same agency as men do, as men heroes do in these stories. If there is a woman hero, she's still a damsel in distress, kind of. She's still a tag-along. She still helps out, but is supplementary to the main man. And Lilium actually gets to be the star and is the powerhouse and it's more like the other, like Slider, the hero of the first book. He's tagging along with Lilium. He's the supplement. He's the one that supports Lilium a little bit, but actually it's Lilium really carrying the group there. And that's a lot of people really responded well to that. So far it's going pretty well.
Right, out of the show right now. So, Erik, you have anything else to say out there? Like, or Liz, if you have any other questions for Erik, you can ask him.
Any other questions? I mean, I feel like we could probably have a conversation that lasts like 3 hours, but about books. But oh, I have a question. I'm actually I plan to go into teaching. And so, what, as an author, what's some advice to maybe you know, a kid in high school who loves to write, but you know, the parents and maybe even like teachers are telling them, hey, that's not really that profitable, like, you know, solve some math problems, go that route because that's where it's at. Like, what advice would you give to blossoming writers?
You have to be, I think, a little realistic for blossoming writers. I would say, for a blossoming writer, to never stop writing. It's too easy to get distracted from your own writing and what's going on with your own projects. Really, especially, and this is advice that was passed on to me, write every day. You either write or you read every day. If you ever want to be a successful writer, that's what you have to do. You write or you read every single day. Now, we have to be realistic in that, especially for budding writers, and even myself, you need a day job. And I think you have to be honest in that you need a day job, or at least a part-time job, to support you until you can get on your feet in a standalone writer. However, that doesn't excuse your day job, your day job isn't an excuse to develop your writing. You need to make that time either in the morning or in the afternoon to develop your writing, to develop your craft, if that's your dream. And it may mean suffering for a little while, doing a job that you don't necessarily care for, but you have to pay the bills, and you have to do, you have to be responsible. There's a lot of writers who, I think, dive into writing right away expecting to be successful, but it takes time. You have to build a reader base, you have to get your name out there, and a lot of, and you have to practice writing a little bit more. And it just, it's unrealistic, I think, to just think that your first book's going to be, you know, a huge hit. And I would say plan realistically, get a job, whether it's flipping burgers at McDonald's or whatever, but that's not an excuse to stop writing and write every single day.
Thank you. That's really helpful, I think, to a lot of students.
Right. Yes. So, Liz and Erik, I think we are coming to the end of the show. Thank you very much for joining us.
Did we lose you?
Next time when we have Author Live Chat Show again with Erik. So thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Jazz, for setting this up, and thank you so much, Liz, for joining us.
Of course, anytime. Bye.
Bye, thanks.
Related